in the heart of a glittering ballroom, where crystal chandeliers sparkled above powerful men and women, one quiet voice dared to cut through the noise. She wasn't a guest, not a business partner, not even someone who belonged in the spotlight. She was just a waitress carrying trays and blending into the background. But in that moment, as a billionaire prepared to sign a deal worth millions, she whispered words that froze the entire room. "Don't sign that." Heads turned, gasps filled, the air and all eyes locked on her. Why would she risk everything? What did she know that no one else dared to say? The story begins on a cold winter evening, inside the grand ballroom of a luxury hotel. Crystal chandeliers glistened like diamonds, the polished marble floors reflected golden light, and the room was filled with the hum of power. Billionaires, investors and politicians, each dressed in tailored suits and sparkling gowns. It was the kind of place where fortunes were made with a single handshake. Among them, unnoticed and underestimated, was Maya, a young black waitress. Her uniform was simple, her steps careful, her presence invisible to most. To the wealthy guests, she was just another server, someone meant to refill glasses and clear plates. But behind her quiet eyes was a storm of courage and secrets. Maya had grown up far from this world of excess. She knew struggle, rejection, and the sting of being dismissed simply because of the color of her skin. Yet here she was, working shifts to support her younger brother's education, swallowing pride each night while wealthy men laughed as though people like her didn't exist. But on this night, something was different. Something dangerous was unfolding before her very eyes. At the head of the long mahogany table sat Victor Hale, a billionaire with power stretching across industries. He was about to sign the most important contract of his career, one that promised wealth beyond imagination. Everyone in the room waited eagerly for his pen to touch the paper. And yet, Maya saw what no one else dared to notice. She saw the trap, hidden in the fine print, the betrayal concealed in the deal. She felt her heart pounding in her chest, knowing that if she stayed silent, a man's empire would crumble. But if she spoke, she could lose everything: her job, her safety, maybe even her. Maya tried to steady her breathing as she moved through the lavish ballroom, tray in hand. The laughter of the powerful echoed around her, a sound she had grown used to ignoring. But tonight that sound pierced her nerves because she knew what was at stake. At the far end of the room, Victor Hale leaned back in his chair, pen poised above the thick folder of documents. The contract looked ordinary to everyone else, a promise of expansion, a deal that would secure his dominance in the market. Guests whispered with excitement. Investors congratulated him prematurely, and the press cameras were ready to capture the moment that would soon make headlines. But Maya, with sharp eyes trained by years of reading the world's cruelty between the lines, saw something no one else did. She had glimpsed the papers earlier while discreetly cleaning the table, and the details unsettled her. Hidden clauses, vague wording, and an almost deliberate ambiguity buried in the fine print. It was a setup. The signatures weren't just sealing a deal. They were handing over power, control, and rights in ways that could destroy Victor's fortune overnight. It wasn't a business opportunity. It was a trap disguised as gold. Her pulse raced. She thought about walking away, pretending she hadn't seen anything. After all, what could a waitress possibly do in a room filled with billionaires? Who would believe her? A young black woman serving drinks if she tried to challenge men in tailored suits with teams of lawyers? They would laugh, dismiss her, maybe even fire her for daring to speak up. But as she walked past the table, Maya overheard fragments of conversation between Victor's business rivals, their smug tones, their satisfied smirks, the way they watched him with the anticipation of hunters closing in on prey. It confirmed her worst fears. They were waiting for him to sign. They were waiting for his downfall. And in that moment, something inside her shifted. Maya thought about her brother, about all the nights she had worked double shifts just to afford his books. She thought about her mother, who had always told her to never bow to injustice, no matter how small or how overwhelming. She thought about every time she had been silenced, overlooked, and underestimated. Tonight, she couldn't ignore it. The air in the room grew heavy as Victor lifted the pen. The guests leaned closer. Maya's hands trembled as she set her tray down, her mind racing with possibilities. If she said nothing, she would leave with her paycheck and the night would go on. But if she spoke, the entire room would turn to her with disbelief, maybe even hostility. She pictured herself standing there, her voice cracking under the weight of 100 stares. She imagined being dragged out, security escorting her away, whispers labeling her as insolent, arrogant, ungrateful, yet she also pictured something else. Victor looking at her not as a waitress, but as the one person in the room who dared to care when everyone else was blinded by greed. Her heart pounded louder, faster, until it drowned out the chatter of the wealthy. She knew there was no turning back. The decision burned inside her chest. Speak the truth and risk everything, or stay silent and watch disaster unfold. As Victor brought the pen closer to the dotted line, Maya's breath caught in her throat. The ballroom, filled with golden light and laughter, suddenly felt like a battlefield. And in that instant, she realized she was no longer invisible. She was the only one who could change the course of what was about to happen. The ballroom seemed to move in slow motion. Victor's pen hovered just a breath above the dotted line, and the crowd leaned forward, as though the ink itself was about to crown a king. Maya's chest tightened. Every instinct told her to shrink back to let the moment pass, but something far stronger roared within her. She stepped forward. The click of her shoes against the polished marble floor sounded louder than the orchestra, playing softly in the background. At first, no one noticed. After all, a waitress moving across the room wasn't unusual. But then she stopped, right at the edge of Victor's table. Her presence cut into the moment like an uninvited storm. A hush fell over the crowd. The laughter stilled. Heads turned, eyes narrowing. Who was she to interrupt? Who was she to break the rhythm of the rich? Maya's hands trembled, but her voice, though tight, carried through the silence like a blade. She warned him not to sign. The words struck the room like lightning. A ripple of shock spread across the faces of the guests. Whispers burst out. Sharp and incredulous, how dare she? A mere waitress challenging billionaires? Security shifted uneasily, waiting for a command. Victor froze, pen still suspended in his hand. His eyes, sharp and calculating, finally moved from the contract to the young woman standing before him. Something in her gaze made him pause. It wasn't arrogance, it wasn't desperation. It was certainty. The men sitting opposite him exchanged glances. Their smugness cracked, replaced with visible irritation. They had been so close, so certain of their trap. Now this girl had spoiled the seamless illusion. One of them leaned back, his jaw tightening, his confidence shaken. Maya's heart thudded against her ribs. She expected laughter, dismissal, maybe even scorn. Instead, she saw hesitation flicker in Victor's expression. The billionaire, who had weathered countless negotiations and surrounded himself with wolves, was hesitating because of her. The silence stretched, every second heavier than the last. Then, like a tidal wave, the outrage came. Voices rose. Some guests gasped, others scoffed. "Who does she think she is?" rippled through the room. The businessmen pressed him to ignore her, to sign. Security moved closer, ready to drag her away. But Victor didn't move. His eyes narrowed as he studied Maya, really studied her. And in that moment, everyone realized the fragile power balance in the room had shifted. The billionaire wasn't signing. Not yet. Not until he knew why. This young black waitress had dared to stand against the entire room. The tension in the ballroom was suffocating. The contract still lay open on the table, its ink thirsty for a signature, yet untouched. All eyes were on Victor, but he wasn't looking at the men across from him anymore. He was looking at Maya, the waitress who had risked everything to interrupt a billionaire's decision. For a heartbeat, Maya thought she had gone too far. Her knees wobbled, but she stood tall, refusing to let fear write the ending. She remembered every time someone had dismissed her because of her uniform, every whisper of prejudice she endured when they assumed a black waitress should remain silent and invisible. She knew this was more than just a piece of paper. It was a man's legacy hanging in the balance, and she could not watch him throw it away. Victor finally set the pen down. The crowd gasped. The silence cracked with murmurs and outrage, but he ignored them. Slowly, he gestured for Maya to explain herself. Security froze mid-step. The businessmen leaned forward, their eyes blazing with anger, as if her very existence was an insult. But Maya didn't falter. She revealed what she had overheard, the hidden clauses, the deliberate deception, the trap disguised as opportunity. Each word landed like a hammer on glass, shattering the illusion of trust. The contract wasn't just unfair, it was a noose, designed to strangle his empire and transfer power into greedy hands. The gasps in the room grew louder. Some guests looked horrified, others ashamed for doubting her. But the men across the table clenched their fists, their polished composure unraveling in front of everyone. Victor's face hardened. Betrayal was a language he knew too well, but tonight, he had been seconds away from being blinded by it. And the one who saved him wasn't a lawyer or an advisor. It was a young woman everyone else had overlooked. The businessmen tried to defend themselves, spitting out excuses, but the crowd wasn't buying it. Their arrogance had been exposed, and the spotlight now illuminated their corruption. Victor tore the contract in half without hesitation. The rip of the paper echoed through the hall like thunder, sealing their downfall. But it wasn't just their defeat that mattered. It was Maya's courage that stood at the center of it all. She hadn't just spoken up, she had dared to confront the powerful in a room where no one believed she had the right to speak at all. Victor stood, his eyes never leaving hers. There was gratitude in his gaze, but also something deeper, a recognition. He knew strength when he saw it. That night, Maya didn't just save a fortune. She rewrote the unspoken rules about who gets to have a voice, about who matters in a room full of power. As the crowd slowly dispersed, whispers followed her. Some called her reckless, others brave. But for those who truly understood, Maya became a symbol of something bigger, a reminder that injustice hides in silence and silence is broken only when someone dares to speak. So let me ask you, how many moments in our own lives have passed where silence allowed injustice to win? And how many futures could be rewritten if someone like Maya found the courage to say, "Don't sign that"?